What's going on, everybody? How's it going? Welcome to the stream. I'm Ian Douglas, author of this website. Sorry for my voice ahead of time. Voice has been a little rough lately with fighting COVID here, so I'll do my best not to cough and things like that during the stream. But welcome aboard. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope you've been doing well. Been busy with 3D printing and stuff like that. Kids have an event this weekend coming up where they sell stuff at their school. So we've been 3D printing like crazy around here just to prepare for that. Um, but yeah, hope everybody's doing good. Getting the updates and stuff for the fundraiser here in just a minute. Let's pull that up real quick and I'll update that as well. Slight update on that. So we're up to about 577. Yeah. All right. Cool. So we're hoping to raise 1,500 bucks by the end of the year, and I'm going to match all that money. But whatever comes in, this is basically money, like all the money I make as a streamer. It's going into this pot of money, and then I'm going to match that, and we're going to give it away to a group called Girls Dream Code, based in Minnesota. So we'll be giving them that money at the end of the month, and that'll wrap up our 2022 giving, and then we'll start our count over again, and we'll raise money for a new group in 2023. So this is just last half of 2022. We raised about $5,000 for a group called Hack the Hood in San Francisco. We gave them that money back in June, and basically we reset our counters, and we're basically going again since then. So Rush Bananas, thanks for the follow. Appreciate that. Recent Turing grad, awesome. Well, thanks for dropping by. Hey, Dan, good to see you. I looked on your channel there just at the very last second as you were rating out, Dan. But hope you're doing well. So Dan, I'm gonna try to get a box this week. That boron is huge and it's gonna be really heavy. So I gotta try to find like a really like big industrial double box or something like that that I can ship that boron over to you to finish up for me. So get that out for you. Appreciate your help with that as well. And then yeah, so Dan's gonna help me finish up my boron build, and meanwhile we've been 3D printing like crazy lately. So we're trying to come up with like, you know, how do we make little price guides and stuff like that for keychains and things like that that the kids have been designing and making and stuff like that. So it'll be a lot of fun. So it's an event that we look forward to every year. We didn't do it last year, and the year before that was COVID. But we've been looking forward to it. It'll be our oldest kid's last year to do it at the school this year, and our youngest is in 7th grade, so he'll have this year and maybe next year if he wants to do some kind of 3D printing giveaway kind of thing. So our youngest wants to do like customized keychains, and our oldest is doing like a 3D catapult into a like a solo cup kind of thing to win 3D prizes. So there's our youngest. Hello, youngest. So yeah, so we're looking forward to that. I got to get these signs made up, and but we'll probably get some like big poster board or something like that to hang on the tables as well. So what's that? Yeah, I know. It's fine. Yeah, yeah. Lots of hardware issues again. No idea why. All I did was reboot, and suddenly my camera stops working. So good times. Um, yeah, Windows needed an update, and whenever you update Windows, like OBS goes to crap. So I've got all kinds of hardware issues again just by updating to the latest build of Windows 11 and driver updates, and you reboot, and my main audio output doesn't work anymore, and my camera's freezing again. Like it's been working great for a couple of weeks, and now it's freezing all the time again. So I swear one of these days I'm just gonna sell this PC and just go back to a Mac. Anyway, hope everybody's doing well. Thought I'd go through some anonymous questions in our Discord community today, and if anybody wants a resume review, you're welcome to send those in as well. Otherwise, I'm just gonna go grab some anonymous questions from our Discord. We'll drop that link in our channel here as well if you want to join us over on Discord. Everything's locking up, including my chatbot. Chatbot's not even working today. All right, well, let's go fix the chatbot. That's going to be a priority. Their chatbot will get up and running here. Got to log back into the chatbot, so bear with me for a second. What else is going on this weekend? Anybody else doing anything fun? Preparing for holidays? Anything like that? Anybody got anything going on? Let me know in chat. Let's ready to go here. All right, so chatbot should get up and running here in just a moment. Nope, it's going to fail because our nano leaf also started failing this week. We had a power outage, and that always knocks out the nano leaf panels. So I got to go disable that in the code, and then we'll get our chatbot back up and running. Right now, if the nanobot doesn't start up on boot, it crashes the whole chatbot. So that's why the chatbot wasn't working. Let's go figure that out. Let's see. I used to have just a flag that says do nano leaf or not. Let's try that. Hopefully that'll at least get the chatbot up and running. All right, chatbot should be live. All right, there we go. Let's try that again with Discord. There's our Discord. So yeah, so you can go join our Discord community if you like. I'm gonna go grab some anonymous questions and we'll go from there. Someone actually asked a question. Again, I'm way behind on questions and so on just because I've been out sick. I signed up for a Udemy course on embedded programming with a microcontroller. It comes with some LEDs, buttons, and a few other things. Do you think making simple projects with that is enough experience, or do they need to be more complex in nature to impress employers? So this particular person was asking about IoT jobs and embedded systems jobs, and that was in our general chatter channel on Discord. Um, I think building some of that kind of stuff is probably enough at least to get their attention to say like I've done a little bit of this kind of work. They were looking for a junior level embedded systems role at a company, and generally I would say for something like that they're probably going to want something a little bit deeper than just self-taught. So if you're following some sort of curriculum for that, I think that's always going to look better. So any sort of curriculum, whether it's a Udemy course or if you can find something on like Udacity or something like that, or even a free code camp, where it's a very structured kind of curriculum. Like you're doing this project based learning. I think that's going to be better than just like go figure out how to do this thing, make an LED blink. Um, those kinds of tutorials are fine, but they do tend to be a little bit simplistic. And embedded systems, they're going to want a lot more deeper knowledge than that. They're going to want to see you accessing and like really poking and peeking, as we call it, into different hardware addresses to be able to do different kinds of things and really maximize the performance of whatever CPU you're actually working in, whatever that embedded system is. And so if you're doing work on an Arduino, for example, they're going to want to see more than just LEDs blinking. Like they'll want to see you like access other sensors and do different things with that data, and then do other things on the Arduino based on that data. Um, so to kind of take it a step further, like hit a button and the light comes on, but what if you hit a button and it reads a temperature sensor and then turns on like a number of LEDs based on the temperature that you read, or actually have it draw it out on a 7-segment display or something like that, where when you hit a button it actually computes like what that actual temperature is and like draw it on a couple of 7-segment LEDs or something like that. That shows a lot more sort of work involved as opposed to just I hit a button and it makes an LED go on. Um, because at that point you're dealing more with hardware, where they're like embedded systems, they're going to want to see more software based knowledge, like how are you implementing algorithms in your code to interact with the hardware. That's really what they're looking for there. Little Freezy, good to see you as well. Hope you're doing well. I'm still fighting COVID, so I'm still really congested, and my voice isn't quite there. So apologize for the quality of my voice. Worse than usual, but we'll get through it today. So I'm just going to go through some questions on our Discord community. But as always, if you got questions, please drop those in chat as we go. If anybody wants a resume review, feel free to drop those. Do resume review. So if you want a resume review, feel free to send that over. Let me know that you're sending one over, and I'll go specifically look for it. Otherwise, I think I'm just going to go through some Discord questions today. The last time I tried the clip thing, it wasn't working. So I got to go back and I got to fix up how my clip generator is working. But we'll get there. We'll get there. Gonna have some work to do over the holidays, kind of revamping a lot of this stuff and try to rebuild what's going on with the chatbot and why the chatbot stopped working and things like that, and how to get over things like if the nano leaf stops working, how do I keep the chatbot up and running? Stuff like that. I need to go back and add that sort of stuff to my chatbots. But yeah, Rush Bananas. If you've got other questions, feel free to drop those in chat as well. I just did a class at Turing on Friday. It's a workshop that I like to run from Postman, and it was a lot of fun. I really like interacting with the students over there. I miss teaching sometimes. I really miss like getting in and like teaching lessons and stuff like that. It's not always possible to do those things, but it's a lot of fun. Dan, thanks for the comment in chat. I would say is it intelligence or is it just wisdom with the years? I think is might be more what we're looking at here. But Postman lesson was a big help. Love that as a tool. Yeah, Postman's really great. Definitely get that on the resume. We're seeing more and more companies using Postman, and not just a shill Postman because I work there. Although I'm very happy to be working there. But it is a really good tool, and if you can show a little bit of experience using tools that companies are also using, it really stands out on a resume. And so that's why a lot of the advice that I give people around resume preparation is, as you're networking with companies and you find out what they use, put that kind of stuff on the resume. Because if like to be one of them, you need to kind of look like one of them. This is sort of what we say. You need to act like them. You need to do what they do. You're you're more likely to sort of fit in on the team, and they're more likely to see you as somebody on their team if you're already doing what they do. So it's not just from an appearance point of view. Like, no, I don't mean that when I say look like they do, but like your skill set looks like their current skill set. So if they use Postman, you should show them that you also use Postman. If they use, a particular kind of editor, then you want to show that too. Although most of the time, like most people won't care like what editor you use on a resume, but they won't care if you use VS Code or Sublime Text or an actual IDE. Like they're probably not going to care unless it's a very specialized tool. But any sort of tooling that they use, if they like as you network with them and get to know them, find out like, hey, what kinds of tools do you use on a daily basis, or on a regular basis? Like, what kinds of things do you use? Do you use tools like Postman? And if they say that they do, or if they start giving you that information, start researching those tools. And if you already use those tools, then you definitely want to call those out on the resume. And you know, explore like what kinds of possibilities are there. Like if they say, "Oh yeah, we develop our APIs using Postman," then go see what it would take to actually design an API inside of Postman, not just consume an API. That's what most people use it for. But knowing like how to actually use more deeper internals of this tool, those kinds of things are going to really stand out if you can call that out on the resume and say, with this project, I went really deep on this particular tool. It looks more impressive to them, and so you'll find you'll get more conversation coming up about that. I've actually talked to Turing students specifically in the past like as much as probably 3 or 4 months ago. And they're like, yeah, I went to this interview, and they actually commented during the interview that I had this particular tool on my resume. Um, and it's like, yeah, it's because you did your homework and you were researching them and you found out that that tool was important to them. That's why you had it on the resume, because it leads to those conversations. Um, Now, whether you still get through the interview is up to you, but sometimes it can really catch their attention, and that's how you're going to stand out opposed to like everybody else applying for that job, because you're showing them that you also use the tools that they use. And so it really makes a difference. It really makes a difference. A lot of people don't think it makes that much of a difference, but it can. Those kinds of soft skills and sort of less technical skills will also really stand out on a resume when you're applying for those jobs. All right, well, let's dive in on some anonymous questions here. I'm going to try the clip thing. We'll see whether it's going to work or not. So we'll get there. All right, let's get a question going here. All right, we had an anonymous question from Chet. Says, I've heard some companies make you wait between applications. Does that apply if you never get called for the role, or does it only apply if you actually get interviewed and get rejected? Most of the time, it'll only happen if you get rejected from a job. There are differences. Every company is going to be a little bit different, and I hate to answer questions with the phrase "it depends," but it really does depend on the company. Most of the time, though, if you apply for a job and they don't have any sort of opening or whatever right now, they're going to keep your stuff on file, and if they have an opening, they'll get back to you. Generally, that timeline will only apply if you start to get through the interview process and they decide for some reason not to move forward with you, or you decide to withdraw as a candidate for whatever reason you're not progressing through the interview stages. Then they'll probably put like probably a 6 month hold. I was talking to one mentee recently where they applied for a job and they got rejected, and they basically said you can reapply in a year. That's a bit aggressive. Most companies are going to be more open minded than that. I would say, try reapplying within 6 months, or ask them, can I reapply in 6 months? What can I be doing between now and 6 months from now to really stand out? Ask them for feedback. Always, always ask for feedback. They may not give a lot of feedback, but if you can get some feedback on things that you did well, and ask them specifically, hey, were there things that stood out that I did particularly well about my application or about the first couple of interviews? They'll generally be okay giving you the positive aspects of like, oh, you did this really well, you did this really well. And you can kind of read between the lines and say, okay, well, they didn't comment anything about my technical skill, or they didn't comment anything about how I handled a code challenge. So maybe that's where I need additional practice. So you can base your sort of like where you want to spend your time in practice by what they don't tell you. So that would be kind of the approach I would take there. But always ask them for feedback, and then ask them as well if it doesn't work out, you can ask them, when can I reapply? Can I reapply in 3 months or 6 months? Um, It'll depend on the size of the company. The smaller the company, the longer you may need to wait. They may not have that many open roles to begin with, but if it's a larger company, they may say like 3 months is fine. Depending again how far you get through the interview process, they want to know that if they decline you because you didn't have enough technical skill, or they didn't think you were experienced enough. 3 months may not be enough to really change their mind. So you can specifically ask them, what can I be doing in the meantime? What kinds of things could I be building? What kinds of skills could I be building? Should I learn some other programming language? Should I learn some other framework? Like, what can I be doing to really stand out as an applicant next time? And see whether they'll let you know. Some companies will give you feedback. Some companies are absolutely closed off and will not give any feedback of any kind. And so that'll also really depend a lot on the company and who they are. But those would be things that I would probably take a look at there. All right, so it looks like I've got. Oh, the clip offset didn't work. That's why. Let's trying to figure out why my clip thing didn't work today is because the chatbot wasn't working while I was going live. So, Dan says I've learned that sometimes asking for feedback can change a company's mind. It can, but in the technical industry, it's less likely to be so. If they've made a determination that you're not qualified or you're not suitable for the role, it's going to be really hard to change their mind on that. They've usually already progressed and moved on with someone else, or the worst case is they go through a bunch of applications and they make an offer to somebody, and while they're waiting for that person to get back to you, you're kind of left hanging. And then once that person says yes, I'll take the job, then they start sending out rejections saying sorry, we chose someone else. um, and then you're left kind of hanging. And then if that person doesn't work out, they're generally not going to come back to you and be like, "Hey, Dan, remember you applied for that job? It's still open if you want it." That's extremely rare to happen. Usually, they'll just repost the job and start all over again. So I don't know why my camera keeps freezing. It's taking me off. There we go. Hey, Wester, good to see you as well. Hope you're doing good. Um, been playing around with some resin printing. I picked up a resin printer for Black Friday deal, and so I 3D printed a ring for myself. It was a style of ring that I had before, and it actually cracked. And I'm like, oh no, how do I fix a resin print? Duh, just use more resin to glue it back together. But I picked up a resin printer. It's a Anycubic Photon Mono X6K. The thing's friggin' enormous. It's huge. Um, but it's working out pretty good. I'm working on like sanding the prints now, because when you break off the supports, you end up with all these little bumps. So I'm playing around with different levels of sandpaper to try to sand it out and smooth it out, and see if I can get back to kind of that glossy finish afterwards. So I found 800 grit does a pretty good job for like getting all the bumps off, and then like getting into higher and higher grits, especially with wet sanding to kind of smooth it out after that. So it's a lot of fun getting back into resin's kind of a chore, to be honest, but it's going all right. But yeah, otherwise we're printing up all the stuff that we need for the school thing this coming weekend. Should have most of the 3D print stuff finished up. And then yeah, so I finished up the spider run a couple of weeks ago, and then over this past week, actually, just was it yesterday, day before, I finished up another giant print. So I'm gonna go get that. So this one took some painting as well, but Superman is also finished. Painted up the base as well. So I did the base in kind of a translucent white, and then painted it with different shades of blue to kind of get that ice effect. These crystals were done in another light blue color, actually the same color that's on his foot right there. But I still kind of went through with like white paint and whatever to kind of give it kind of an ice sort of effect, so you can get different sorts of shimmers and stuff off of it. But yeah, this thing turned out way larger than I thought it was going to be. Scan down that post a little bit more to fit in there a little better. I just want to go in there. But yeah, and then with the multi-material printing on the bamboo, I even got like his eyeballs in there with pupils. I don't know how well that'll actually show up on camera, but actually colored in like a blue iris and a black pupil. What's weird though is his head looks really small, based on the rest of the size of his body. Like his head needs to be like much larger than it is. And then with this tiny little melon, but it all came together pretty good. So I gave a quick little paint over his uniform, and his cape. Of course, his cape was in multiple pieces, so I had to glue all that together and then bondo it, sand it, paint all that down. And so on. So that was a fun one to make. So that's actually going to be a gift for a friend of mine who's a huge Superman fan. So, hey, Phil, good to see you in chat as well. Now that you say that, it does look small. Yeah, like just something about the proportion of the body and everything else. His head just seems like really really small. Like when you think about like body proportions, like was it from your wrist bone to your elbow is approximately the length of your head? Well, that would mean that his head should be that big. So it's like much smaller than it should be, and like from the side profile, it looks much smaller. Just different angles is like, wow, his head looks tiny compared to the rest of his body. That was fun to put together. Make sure I don't knock the thing over. But yeah, the skin tone, like that's all 100% polymaker filament, and the skin tone, I think I used like a peanut color. It's kind of an interesting sort of skin tone, like tan skin tone, sort of look to it. I'll knock them over. But yeah, it was a really great print. The designer on that model did a pretty good job. It's the same designer that did the Spider Gwen as well. Superman was more muscle than brain. Yeah, I suppose so. I suppose so. Cool. Well, Full Snable, good to see you in chat. What's going on in your end of the world? Hope things are going great over in Europe. I'm gonna go through a bunch more questions in our Discord community as well. So I'm gonna kind of flag those as having been done. I know that I've answered that one in the past. Uh, Cool. So yeah, I'm just gonna go through chat and or go through our Discord community and answer some anonymous questions today. We'll see how long my voice holds up, and then I've got like a bunch of other stuff I need to do. Got typical sort of Sunday chores and everything, which for us is usually like go to Costco, get food for the week, prep all the food for the week, make dinners and things like that. Like do any sort of processing on the groceries and so on. And then yeah, we've got to finish getting stuff ready for the kids thing at school this week. So got to buy some folding tables. So Costco makes these little folding tables. They're like 4 feet long. We got to pick up a couple of those. We've got one. I think I'm going to pick up two more, and then yeah, just make sure all our 3D prints are good to go. Get them boxed up and ready to go. We got different categories of things that we've been 3D printing, and making sure that we're going through and making sure that the license on all of them says like, yes, you're allowed to sell this thing. Even though it's for a fundraiser for a school, I always want to be on the up and up as far as like, are we allowed to actually sell this thing? And so I've been backing people on Patreon, like Flexi Factory, who basically tell you if you back us on Patreon, then you get a license to sell our stuff. It's like, okay, I'll pay $10 a month to be able to sell your stuff. And so we backed a couple of makers, just so we'd have access to their models and making sure that we have permission for those that specifically say like this is not for commercial use, reaching out to them specifically saying, hey, can we have written permissions for a school fundraiser? And everybody that we've reached out to has been like, yeah, no problem. Which is really great. It's always great to kind of interact with the designers and say, hey, we're going to give out as much information as you want us to give out about you. Like we'll make little slips of paper that as we're selling these things, we're making sure people know who you are, stuff like that. So we've made like giant 3D printed chess sets. What else we got? We got the Cali Dragon, um, and all the Flexi Factory kind of stuff that we've been printing. I might do a couple of the frogs and things like that, but mostly we're doing the Imperial Dragons because the dragons are always a big hit. And then we found a bunch of little puzzles that were marked as commercial okay, and so we've printed off some 3D puzzles and things like that to kind of go along with everything else. So the catapult kit that we did as one of the giveaways back in October. It's this kit card that you can assemble this little catapult. My oldest decided he wanted to do a catapult game where people actually try to fling stuff off these catapults into like red solo cups or something like that. And what we're going to do is we're going to color the bottom of the cup with, like a small, medium, large, or something like that. And then if they get it in one of those cups, they'll win a prize of that size. And so we're like coming up with like, okay, well, what do we consider to be a small prize? What do we make a medium prize? What do we make a big prize? And so just printing off different things like that. And so some of the puzzles and some of the dragons, and we found like these little like little pots, like for succulents, things like that, for little plants and things like that that we can just get some of those kinds of things printed up. And then of course we got the infinite fidget cubes. These were not marked as being commercial, but I did reach out to the designer saying like, hey, like it's for a school thing, is that cool? And they're like, yeah, absolutely, like print as many as you want. So it was really awesome, like getting permission from folks like that. So making a grocery list now, cool. Go run to Costco for me. All right, well let's go through some more questions here, and then see how long my voice is gonna hold up. All right, another anonymous question that we had from chat asked: is it common for candidates to ask the interviewers questions during an on-site interview? Yes, absolutely. You should always be asking questions. The interview process it's really a two-way process. You're interviewing them every bit as much as they're interviewing you. So you want to make sure to ask good questions. You want to make sure that your questions are relevant to the kinds of things that you've been learning about them as a company, and don't just ask the interviewer like, "What's your day like?" At the office kind of thing, or working remote. Like, what's your day to day kind of thing. Ask questions that are going to stand out more than those kinds of questions, because those questions are kind of boring, and those aren't going to stand out in a good way. They're going to think you're unimaginative if you're just asking questions like that. But if you're kind of researching the company and you're getting to know the company a little bit, asking them questions about, hey, I've been chatting with Ian over there, and Ian mentioned this technology, that technology. Like, how are you using that technology? How did the company offer training around that thing to kind of get everybody up to speed on learning something new? Is it something you have to do on your own? Do they dedicate time during the day to do that? Like, how are you learning this stuff? You can ask those sorts of questions. I like to ask the same questions to both engineers and managers and make sure that the answers kind of coincide with each other. That the answers sound the same. Um, and like everything from how do ideas kind of get sort of created as a team? Like, how do you determine what sort of features get built into the product? Who decides on that feature set? Who decides on the timing of that feature set? And then when it's time to actually assign the work, does the person that came up with the idea get to work on the idea, or is it based on the person who's strongest in that skill? They get to build it. It'll give you an idea of whether the company caters to the strengths of the team or also the interests of the people on the team. Those are going to be really key factors to let you know what it's going to be like to work there. Because if, as a manager, I need to balance how interested people are in what we're building with the strength of like how quickly can we actually get this thing built. Like, if I'm really good at doing authentication systems, but I'm not very good at front end design, and we need to build something on front end, if that's something that I'm really interested in, then I hope my manager is going to give me the opportunity to work on it. Otherwise, I'm going to start losing interest in the job. But from a managerial point of view, if I'm not very good at a particular skill, how do I balance, or like if my manager recognizes that I'm not good at a particular skill, they need to balance, okay, well, Ian's interested in that thing, but not very good at that thing. How do we get Ian to work with someone else to kind of level up his skill so that he stays interested and stays around at the company? Excuse me. But also balancing that with we do have deadlines. We do have to get things done in a reasonable amount of time. So how do we balance those things? Those are really key indicators for businesses. Every manager is going to treat things a little bit differently. Some are going to hold more to the business side of things and lean more into those deadlines of how quickly can we get things done. Some of them are going to care more about their teams and determine how do I grow my team? how do I make sure that my team is working on what they're interested in working on, not just what they're good at? Because maybe like I said, maybe I'm really good at authentication systems, but I don't want that to be the only thing I do. Like, yeah, I might be good at it and I might be able to do it quickly, but I also want to learn and grow. Like, I don't want to feel like I'm getting stale in my role, just doing the same thing over and over again. So I would say if it starts to feel that way, you need to have that conversation with your manager. But those are the kinds of questions that you want to ask during the interview is ask them good questions that are going to stand out. You want to make sure that you're asking questions that give you information about what it's going to be like to work there, how supported you're going to be, and what kind of growth you're going to have at the company. Whatever's important to you, you need to make sure that you're asking questions and make sure that you're getting that information from them. The recruiters aren't always going to have information on a technical level about the things that you want to know about a company. There may be technical level things that you're going to want to ask during the interview. So most interviews are going to start with a couple of minutes of introduction, tell me about yourself, sort of questions, and then go into, whatever the main sort of topic of that interview session is going to be, whether it's a technical challenge or behavioral questions. And then there's going to be time at the end for questions from you. In my experience, though, what makes a best interview practice is when everything feels very conversational, where it doesn't feel like, okay, now we have the dedicated 5 minute time for you to ask me questions. You want to make sure that you can ask questions throughout and not just wait to the very end. So, one thing that I was doing when I did my job hunt a year ago is I kept lots and lots of notes about, as I'm chatting with someone, I would write down, oh, make sure to ask them about this. But I wouldn't always wait to the very end and say, by the way, I wanted to ask you about this thing that you mentioned like a half an hour ago. I would actually ask while we're having that conversation, and they would ask me a question and I would come up with a couple of points and I'd be writing out a note and then I would write them a comment, or I would write a comment in my notes saying, make sure to ask about this. So while I'm giving my answer, I might end my answer with a question back to them about a particular topic or something that we've been discussing or whatever. I think a good interview should be conversation, not interrogation. And so any way that you can sort of bring those questions up while you're still having those conversations and not make it where you feel like you have to wait to the very end to ask those questions. And so paying attention to the kinds of things that they're asking you, and then as you're coming up with answers or whatever, even just jot down a couple of notes, like write down a couple of notes about like, oh, I want to make sure to ask about this or that. Or while they're explaining something, you can write out some notes and say, hey, I've got a follow-up question about that. You mentioned this and this, like what about this or that? And you can sort of interject that. And now you're actually asking those questions while you're going through the interview, and it's not a whole like dedicated time at the end. The other thing with having questions at the end is they typically have a very limited amount of time, and so you're limited with the number of questions that you can ask or how deep they can go into an answer. I've been in interviews where someone asks a really thoughtful question. I'm like, oh, I really want to dive into that, but we literally have like 2 minutes before I gotta like roll out to the next interviewer. And you don't want that to happen either. So as much as possible, you want to try to ask those questions during the interview and not wait to the very end of the session for that. Full Austin chat. What's your biggest pain point? Sometimes I ask. Oh yeah. Do you have separate career tracks for engineers, managers? I mean, most companies will have a different career track because again, you can stay on the engineering side where you go into like principal roles and staff roles, or you can go over the managerial side where you're going into like team lead, and then going into the managerial where you're taking care of the people on the team, as opposed to more of the hands-on contribution of staying in the engineering side. But then again, as you progress through like staff engineer, principal engineer, and architect level and things like that, you're actually getting more and more removed from the code as well. So it really depends on those kinds of things. But if those are important topics to you, you absolutely need to bring those up during the interview. You can't wait until the very end and expect that they have time reserved for that. You want to make sure that you can ask those questions while you're having the interview. If they don't have those tracks, I'm not likely to take the job if I can. If you can choose, yeah. I mean, that's an important if that's important to you, then yeah, you absolutely need to ask those kinds of things. I don't ask for my career. I just don't want a good developer becoming a bad manager. True. Um, yeah, I mean, you want to make sure that they don't push their engineers down a management track just because they feel that is the progression. A lot of times, like a senior engineer will turn into like a lead engineer, and then that will start to feel like you're going down a manager track, but it doesn't have to be. And that's something that you can sort of have that conversation with the company about as well, and just say like, hey, you know what, I don't mind being a team lead and sort of directing like who's working on what, but from a career perspective, like I don't want to be managing people. I'd rather be managing more about the technical aspects of the project, and that'll help sort of keep you down that technical track as opposed to going down a managerial track. But those are all conversations that you want to have. Um, it's easy to feel pushed in a particular direction from a company, um, but any good manager should be finding out before that happens whether you're even interested in going down that track. Um, if they're a bad manager, they're going to sort of push you down the track they want you to go down, and you have to make sure that you're okay with that. But they should be asking you ahead of time, like, "Hey, do you want to get into management? Like, what's your aspiration? What do you want to be doing down the road?" They should be asking you those questions and making sure that they're doing that appropriately for you. The worst manager I had was a previous dev that wanted a pay rise and the prestige of the promotion, but hated everything else about the manager job. Yeah, that's unfortunate. Um, I would say they would probably be better off just leaving the company and finding another job than staying at a job and being bad or being ineffective. Because a bad manager is actually going to drive people away from the company. There's truth in the saying that you don't quit the job, you quit your manager. Um, I've certainly done that at several places. It's like I hate working with that person, and I don't even want to be around that person anymore. So I'm just gonna leave the job completely. But it's always disappointing when you feel that you have to leave a company because of a manager type of role, or you feel like you're being pushed into a role that you don't like and you don't want. Sign of a good manager is that they're asking you what you want your career progression to be, and then making sure that they're finding those opportunities. Companies aren't always going to be big enough to do that, but if the company is big enough and they've got the flexibility to do that, then that's a sign of a good company. And it's a sign of a good manager when they're making that happen for you. If they're just kind of doing what they want to do, then that's a sign that you probably want to get out at some point. This would be a good one to dive into. This one's very appropriate for interview conversation. We had another anonymous question come in on our Discord community asking, how should I approach system design problems? Can I share some resources that you like? Absolutely. Let me go pull those up real quick. Like most kinds of questions, system design questions have kind of a strategy that I think that you should follow. There are going to be sort of steps that you're going to want to take around how to formulate what you want your answer to be. And then the amount of information that they're going to want from you is going to differ a little bit company to company and also role to role. But I would say there are a handful of steps that you want to follow, and I'll outline this in the video below. But basically, there are 7 steps that I like to follow when I'm thinking about system design. And the first one is going to be clarifying questions to the interviewer about functional and non-functional requirements. So a functional requirement is what should the thing be doing. A non-functional requirement is what else do I need to keep in mind? Like, is there a certain amount of time that something needs to happen in, or is there a certain amount of storage that I need to sort of be keep in mind while I'm defining this thing? That's not really a functional requirement. A functional requirement is like, how does this thing actually work? How do I store the data? Not so much like, we want to store as little as possible. That's more of a non-functional requirement. So that would be step one: is make sure that you're really clear on what it is they want you to build. And then what I like to do from step two point of view is start to kind of sketch out what would that high level sort of architecture look like. What would the main sort of components be? Do I need a database? Do I need some sort of like cron based server to kick this thing off? Do I need some sort of queue system? Do I need a job worker kind of system? Um, you know, do I need like an API gateway of some kind? Like, what are the main sort of big pieces? Like, if I had to sort of make a big block diagram about what these things are, what would those giant pieces look like? That would be step two, is just start to really sketch those things out, and then from there maybe go into, okay, well, if I need to access a database, like what would that database schema look like? Some system design is going to focus a lot more attention on the database schema. Some will focus more on the overall functionality of how do these larger components communicate, and less about what data are we actually storing or transmitting from system to system. They want more just how do we scale this thing, or how do we grow this from 1,000 customers to 1,000,000 customers. But for me, step three might go into like a database schema design, or the overall storage or data transmission sort of design of like what data are we actually transmitting from system to system. From there, step four would be, let's do some rough estimations on the amount of traffic, the amount of load, the amount of time things might take. How long would it take to sort of package this data up and get it from system to system, from the very initial intake of that data to the output of that data? Like, what kind of time are we looking at there? Is there a functional requirement or a non-functional requirement about that? Like, does it have to happen within a certain amount of payload or a certain time of processing this particular data? And that's where, once you have these components sort of defined, and you kind of have the rough uh, sort of layout of, this is what I want to store in my database, or this is what I need to store in a file system, then you can sort of rough calculate, okay, we're pushing approximately this much traffic over this much time, so we're going to need so much bandwidth and so on. From there, I would say for step five, it's really going to start to like go into more and more detail and deeper detail on each of those things. Um, so when I think of system design, I actually bring things back to Bob Ross, which is kind of funny if you've ever watched Bob Ross paint a painting. Bob Ross doesn't start with the happy little trees and all the really fine detail of like, let me draw, the shadow on this tree trunk or whatever. He always starts with the sky, and then he gets into the clouds, and then the shape of the mountain and the hills and whatever, and it gradually gets into the foreground and the really fine detail. You want to kind of do system design the same way, where you start at a very high level. What's the overall goal that I'm trying to achieve? And then keeping that goal in mind. Like, I want a single mountain with a cabin and a waterfall. Like, those are the main kinds of themes about this painting that I'm making. And then from there, as you're defining all of the other things, you're kind of keeping those goals in mind of like, okay, well, I can't put in a whole river and a lake because my goal was to have a waterfall. Or, I can't block out too much of the background because I wanted a mountain to be in the picture. And so you're kind of keeping those goals in mind while you're designing and defining everything else. And so as you're going through, and you're sort of doing the block diagram, and you're coming up with a rough idea of the schema and the rough idea of traffic and so on, gradually then getting down into more and more detail. And so then you can say, okay, well, based on this block diagram, let me go into a little more detail on each of these components. And also asking the interviewer, are there any parts of this that you want way more information about, or any of these components that you want less information about, so that you're not going into like really deep conversation about particular areas of the components that they don't care about, or that they aren't as interested in. Some interviewers, though, are going to let you sort of ramble on with wherever your strengths are. So if you're really good at data storage, they're going to want to hear, like, what do you have to say about data storage? Because they want to know that that you're taking those things into account, that they want to hear where your strengths are, and they want to hear what you're catering to there. But sometimes they want to direct the conversation a little bit more, as far as like what's important to them, and what they want to hear, and so on. Let me mute my mic here for just a moment. Sorry, I'm back. And so once you start getting into more and more information about each of those things, then you can work on, okay, now how do we scale this? So step 6, now that you've gone into a little more information about it and you have everything kind of defined out. For me, step 6 is, how do we scale this? How do we make it 10 times bigger, 10 times faster, or 100 times bigger, 100 times faster? How do we sort of grow the system? How do we know when it's time to grow certain systems? So then you're getting into monitoring and observability, and knowing like this system's going to start to struggle more than this other system, and so how do we start to scale those systems? And then from there, I would say step 7 would be, identifying and resolving those bottlenecks. So as part of the scalability, you're going to start to determine like which parts of these systems are going to have problems. How do we address that as early as possible so that we don't actually run into that as a problem later on? And so for me, I like following kind of those 7 steps. So clarify your questions about functional, non-functional requirements. Step 2 is come up with a really high level sort of block diagram of what are each of these components going to be. Step 3 then is getting into what's my actual data storage or data transfer. What are those going to look like? It's not necessarily defining the API, but it's maybe, I'm going to need this information from this system to carry over to this system so that I can kind of loop back and do something else with that data later on. Maybe we need to go back and update some data, based on what we've processed. And then from there, step 4 would be coming up with that rough estimation of, the total amount of traffic, the total amount of storage, the total amount of load or time that something is going to take. From there, step 5 is going into more and more detail. So going into like more of the happy little tree, like getting into the fine level detail on whichever components a particular company wants you to focus on, or whatever that interviewer wants you to focus on. And then from there, if you've got time, step 6 and 7. Step 6 is getting into scalability. How do we grow this? How do we make it 10 times better or 100 times better? Some companies are going to want to hear what kind of experience you have with that. If you don't have experience with it and it's just theoretical, that's okay too. Step 7 then is trying to figure out, okay, well, how do we monitor this? How do we do logging? How do we sort of feed that back into our system so that we know when it's time to scale a particular system or identify bottlenecks of where we might have some pain points? So if you can sort of manage all 7 of those things within like a 1 hour type of system design interview, I think you're going to cover most of the bases that companies are looking for there. I'll put some links in the description under the video below that'll give you some other URLs and things like that that I would like to follow as well. Alrighty. Fool says in chat, I think one scaling issue often not discussed is how to be able to scale within the same or similar number of engineers. Um, True. Yeah, you shouldn't have to grow the team in order to grow a system, but you are going to have your team be aware of, how do we monitor this? Like, how do we know when it's time to scale something? And are we going from one system to 2 systems, or does that system need to break into like multiple, like smaller pieces where we're getting into like a microservice kind of thing? Or, is this just like one area and we can just scale this one part and this other part is already sort of isolated enough that, we don't have to scale the entire operation? But at some point, you are going to have to scale that entire operation. You're going to say, like, all this stuff is running in one data center. We need to copy this stuff over to another data center for redundancy and resilience. Like, if this data center goes down, like, we can't not be online. So now, how do we bring this up in another data center or another region or something like that, to where you've got some resiliency and failover, planning and things like that as well. Yeah, I really like getting into system design. System design is a lot of fun. I don't know that I've actually done a professional system design interview myself in quite a few years. It's been a while, but I do some mentoring about that on Interviewing IO. If anybody is interested in doing some mock interviews sometime, you're welcome to go over to interviewing.io and register over there, and you can specifically ask their support team if you can interview with me, or I can let you know what my schedule is, and you can try to find me on their calendar. They don't really have a way right now to say like, here's my referral link, and like in order to get an interview specifically with me. But if you sign up for any of their dedicated coaching, you can always request me specifically. Um, Beeb Ben Esmen. Just call you Beeb for now. Um, when should one stop doing front end development and move on to back end? When you no longer like front end development. I think that would be that would be the best way of figuring that out. Um, I don't know that you have to. Like there's nothing defined in what we do as software developers or as web developers that say like, okay, I've done enough front end, now I have to go do back end. It's really where you want to take your career. If you want to focus on front end and be really, really good at front end, you can stay in front end. If you really want to go full stack, then you can certainly start to pick that up whenever you want to start feeling, like you want to learn something. That's the best time when you've got that interest and you've got the time to take, and you've got the motivation to do it. That would be the time to do it. You don't want to. I would say you don't typically want to feel like you're being pushed into something like, oh, my company wants me to start doing back end development. Um, they should only be sort of asking you to do that if they know you have an interest in it and not if it's like going against what you want your career aspiration to be. If you want to be full stack, then yeah, you're going to need to know a bit of front end and a bit of back end. But also the middleware of like how do we make those two things talk? How do we make those things communicate? That's going to be a big part of it as well. Um, but yeah, you should never feel like there's a you have to do both. It are you going to be more marketable as a developer if you can do front end and back end? Sure, but if you're not particularly suited to it or you don't enjoy it, then you shouldn't feel like you're pushed into something that you're not going to enjoy, because then you're kind of not wasting your career, but you're not pursuing the career that you want to have. Um, but at the same time, if you feel like you're not enjoying front end as much or you want to just explore back end and see what it's all about, then yeah, you can start to go pick up those skills, tinker with it a little bit, see whether you actually like it or not, and then decide from there if you want to keep pursuing that as a prospect or not. Follow up in chat. I'd love to make apps, but my front end looks horrible and I don't know back end. So what should I do first? That's a good question. It's a good follow up as well. If you are a front end developer and you feel like your front end skills aren't where they should be, you can also make that determination. Do I want to get better at this, or do I just want to pursue something else because I don't enjoy it? Some people don't enjoy it because they don't feel they're getting better at it. Some like the pursuit of like, I really want to get better at this thing, so I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep trying. Um, I think the more you practice, the better that you can become at things. But I think that um, there are diminishing returns, as we call it, where you're putting more and more time into it, and you're not making incremental process or progress. I think having feedback from people is also really important. So if you're a front end dev and you don't feel that your interface is getting better, ask people what you can do to become better if that's something that you want to stay doing. Like if you've been trained as a front end developer, like let's say you went to a boot camp and you learned front end, but you don't feel you're very comfortable at front end or your front end doesn't look as good as other people, ask other people for feedback and then start incorporating that feedback. And if you start getting better and say, is this better? Is this, am I kind of going in the right direction here? They'll let you know. But if it's at a point where they're like, yeah, you're really not getting better at this, then you can make a determination of like, okay, I want to stop doing front end and I want to move more into the back end. From a backend perspective, there are a lot of different things that you can do on the back end as well. Do you want to get into API design? Do you want to get into database? Do you want to get into more systems? Do you want to get into scalability? Do you want to get into security? Like there's lots of different avenues and aspects that you can get into there as well. And so understanding what those possibilities are and what sort of um, directions you can take your career from there will be beneficial. I think having done a little bit of front end, you'll actually become a really good back end developer because you're going to have an understanding of what front end developers are going to need as far as how you're returning data in a particular way, like what's going to make things easy for the front end team to sort of consume the resources that you're making available and so on. So those would be things to keep in mind there. I would say anytime you're learning something new, though, and this is something I talked about earlier on the stream, you want to make sure that you're following some sort of curated curriculum where it's structured, where you're not just saying, okay, I want to go learn backend. So how do I learn backend? And you find one tutorial on like a Node Express kind of backend, and now you think you're a backend developer. I would say make sure it's methodical. Make sure you're following like, not just a single tutorial of like, here's how to do this one thing in Node and Express, and now you're a backend developer. It's something where you're gonna have to learn like what are the different disciplines of being a backend developer. Like, how do I build an API? Why do I build it a particular way? How do I structure that data? Why do I do that a particular way? How, what are the best practices about reading and writing to a database? Why is that? Making sure that you're following through on that curriculum to make sure that it's thorough, because following a single like here's how to go build a Node Express and talk to Mongo or talk to Postgres or whatever, they're not necessarily going to dive into this is why we use this ORM over that ORM. This is why we structure our data this way over that way. Like you have to make sure that you're learning that aspect of it as well. And so again, I tend to go back to like Free Code Camp. 100 Devs does a pretty good job as far as like full stack development. There are free programs out there that are going to be very structured around some of that. So I'd say any kind of curriculum you can follow that's going to be very structured and go into a lot of best practices about how and why. Don't just follow like a single tutorial or even tutorials from a single author. You want to look for content that's been curated and written by several authors, or that has been curated by a group like Free Code Camp or something like that, where they're going through and they're making sure that yes, this is best practice because of reasons. Um, I would go through that sort of thing. More follow up from chat. Is it wise learning a modest amount of front end and then a modest amount of back end continuing learning? Um, Again, it depends on where you want to take your career. If you want to focus on being a full stack developer, then yes, you're going to need to do a little bit of front end and a little bit of back end and learn how to make a project that can combine elements of both. You can, for example, build like if you build like a Rails application or a Django application in Python, or a Rails application in Ruby, or like a C#.NET, kind of application where you're doing kind of the back end and the middleware and you're kind of making front end available, like you can build some views in HTML. Is that considered full stack? I mean, technically, yes, because you're still doing some of the front end work. Some people are going to look at full stack development as, you build an API on the back end and you build like a React or a Vue, kind of based front end, that are completely separate applications where you can deploy just the front end or you can deploy just the back end. Where when you do something like a Rails app or a Django app, you're kind of deploying the whole application every time, where it's the back end and the middleware and the front end all as the same application. Now you can also get into Rails apps that are, have like a React front end or a Django app with like an Angular front end. You can certainly design those and still deploy that all as one big application if that's how you want to structure it. That is still technically considered full stack because you're developing a front end application and a back end application, and you're managing all the communication between them. So that will work fine. It really depends on where you want to take your career, though. If you're trying to transition from one to the other, then I would say do what you can in the technology that you have. If you're already working in a particular sort of stack, like your question kind of sounded like I'm currently front end and I want to transition towards the back end. Then I would say continue to keep your front end skills sharp while you're learning back end. I think it's something you don't want to like give up on it completely, but you gradually want to transition away from it. It's not like, okay, I'm no longer doing any more HTML, CSS as of today. I'm only going to focus on backend. I think that's a bit of an abrupt change. especially if you're already working in a particular field. Now, if you've gone through like front end training and you're not able to find a job, but and you find that there are more jobs for a back end developer, then then it is going to be more of a drastic cutoff between one skill set and migrating to another skill set. But again, I would say make sure that you're following some sort of curated curriculum and so on, that you're following good practices on that. Or follow up. I'm 16. I don't have a job, minimal experience in front end. I'd love to start my own apps, but I'm not pleased with my front end skills. Okay. Well, I mean, kudos to you to start out with. I would say you're young enough. You got a lot of time ahead of you. I've been in the industry longer than you've been alive, um, but um, if you have minimal experience, then you're not really like losing out on skill. Um, and I would say that you've got the time and the energy to kind of pursue what you want to pursue. So if you want to get into more back end or more full stack, you've got plenty of time to try to figure that out. Just make sure that you're following industry best practices around things. And I would probably focus on like Free Code Camp. They're going to have a lot of good curriculum over the different kinds of technologies that you're going to want to learn, things that you may already be familiar with, or programming languages that are going to be really suitable in the future. I would say probably focus on like a Python or a C sharp if you're going to do back end. Um, if you've done some front end and you've done some JavaScript there, you can do JavaScript on the back end as well. I would say you're probably going to be a little more flexible as a back end developer if you learn C sharp or Python than staying with JavaScript on the back end. There are going to be full stack JavaScript jobs where you're doing everything in JavaScript. But I'd say if you've already studied a little bit of JavaScript, maybe look into a second programming language, but be careful learning too many technologies. You don't want to like go through all of this learning and then claim 10 different programming languages and 15 different frameworks and whatever. Because that's not going to be like, you're not going to have the depth of knowledge on that. You're going to have a breadth of knowledge where you've learned a lot of things, but you're not going to have the depth of knowledge on learning one thing particularly well. um, so if you have worked in JavaScript in front end and you enjoy JavaScript, then you can continue to do JavaScript on the back end. It's going to feel more familiar because you already know a little bit of that language. But transitioning from JavaScript into a Python or a C sharp is not going to be that difficult. Or if you've done TypeScript, C sharp is probably going to feel a little more intuitive than switching to something like Python, which is not a not strongly typed language. um, I would uh, I would probably look at that. But yeah, I think you've got lots of time, you've got lots of energy and so on, in order to pursue those kinds of interests. So I would lean into that for sure. Um, do you think I should continue learning and eventually build apps or learn to get a job? I would say you're going to need to build the apps in order to get a job. So I wouldn't focus too much on like how to win people over and how to get through the interview process yet. I think you need to learn the actual technical skills of actually building the applications. Sorry, my camera stopped working there. You're gonna have to learn how to build the applications in order to even apply for the jobs. So I would focus on the application side of it first. Um, Hey, Clip, good to see you in chat. First time chat as well. Any advice for someone coming from a data science background who wants to move more to a software engineer type of role? Um, yeah, I would say from a data science background, like you're already going to have some programming skill involved there, where you've been doing like data modeling and maybe machine learning and so on. It really depends on what aspect of data science you've been involved in, but at a minimum, you'll have worked with data sets and manipulating data, for inputs and outputs, doing some sort of transformation on that data in order to tell a story. Now, you might not be doing the data analysis yourself. You might just be manipulating the data and then providing that to someone else to actually, tell a story with that. But any sort of work that you've been doing around manipulating that data, you've already been doing some algorithmic thinking about how do I take the data that looks like this and make it look like that. So you've already got a little bit of that. I would say, uh, again, it feels like every answer that I've given on the stream today starts with "it depends." Um, like in the last question, like, how do I learn backend? Well, it depends what you want to do with your career in the future. Um, for yourself, how do I move from data science into regular software application development? Depends what kind of development you want to be doing. Do you want to do backend development? Do you want to do mobile app development? Like, what kind of development do you want to do? Because that's going to help shape the transition from one to the other. Like I said, in data science, you're already doing data modeling and transformation of that data, what we call ETL, where you're doing extraction, transformation, and loading that data into something else. You're already doing some of that. So I would say getting into like a data analysis kind of role where maybe you're interpreting that data, um, or maybe you want to start dealing more with database systems. How do I do data warehousing? Or how do I take these data models that I'm already used to using, and then how do I, make that scalable? How do I focus on that aspect? Or how do I store things in a more efficient manner? Is there a way that I can manipulate that data in some other way to do something? Or can I build an API on top of that data to make that data available as an API? That would sort of transition you into a backend developer type of role, where going into more of the data storage and the data warehousing, and maybe the data analysis. That's going to take you even deeper down the data side of things. So it does depend a little bit on what you want to be doing with your career and where you want to take these skills. Um, so if it does depend a little bit as far as like what kind of software engineering you want to get into. Um, so I would take a look at like what interests you in software development, like what kinds of applications would you envision yourself building, and then go from there. I would say if you if you want to dabble a little bit and just try to explore what the possibilities would be, then I would say maybe starting from the data side of it, maybe build a little API, in front of it. Like, how do I actually access this data using an API? And then from there, get into some sort of visualization of that data with some front end work, like play around with some dashboarding tools or some visualization tools where you can take that data and draw some charts or something like that and draw a little dashboard based on the data. That'll dabble a little bit on the back end side of it for building an API in front of the data and then providing that data to something like a front end where you can play with dashboarding, and then have a look through that. Like how did that feel building that? Basically, not to psychoanalyze it, but like which part of that were you really excited about? Which part of it did you really get into and go, oh, you know what? I really like visualizing that data, or I really like, making that data available for other people to call in different ways. That's going to be your answer there. Is like, where is your interest going to take you? What's going to be sort of interesting to you from that aspect of it? Um, as far as do you really like building that API? Do you like building that sort of interaction layer? Or are you just more interested in the visualization side of it? Maybe you want to focus more on the dashboarding tools where, other people make those APIs available. And then, you want to explore, how do I build pie charts and graph charts and scatter charts and whatever based on that data? It's going to depend a little bit on where your interests lie. Excuse me a sec. Sorry about that. B was also asking in chat, do you think I should continue to learning to eventually build apps or learn to get a job? Yeah, so we already talked about that. Like, you're gonna have to learn to build applications in order to get a job. That's how you're gonna attract a company. You're gonna stand out to a company by building projects. Just applying to a job saying, "Hey, I've learned this curriculum on my own. I think I'm qualified for this job." They're gonna look like our whole technical interview process is a demonstration of your skill. And so the more of that skill you can demonstrate, the less of a hassle that interview process is going to be. Some companies are still going to have pretty rigid interview processes, but the more you can demonstrate your skill, the better off you're going to be. And so the more kinds of projects that you can build, the different kinds of projects, different aspects of projects, and sort of how you talk about your projects, about this is what I learned, this is why I built it for this particular kind of user. I really wanted to learn this particular technology or this particular way of doing things. And so any sort of project-based learning, I think, is going to really help the most. So again, as you're looking for that curriculum for, I want to go get a job doing this kind of application development, you're going to want to find some sort of project in, about that. Now, you want to make sure that you're not building the exact project that, the curriculum is telling you to do necessarily. Otherwise, everybody that learns that curriculum is building the exact same, magic 8 ball, or, me and my friends want to have lunch together. Like, how do we find our favorite place to go eat? Or a voting app where everybody can vote on a place to go eat. It's like every hiring manager, we've all seen like hundreds of those projects, and we're bored with those projects. You're not going to stand out as an applicant by building those kinds of things. You want to build something that's pretty novel, and something that's going to really stand out of like, oh, this is something I haven't seen before. And so any kind of idea that you have, like, look around at other people's projects, look around at other GitHub projects, and see whether you're building the same thing that other people are building. There is comfort in that, there's familiarity in that, and you'll be able to look at other people's projects and go, okay, well, I don't understand how to build this aspect of this thing, so I'm going to go look at somebody else's to-do list app just to see how that's done. But at the end of the day, you don't want like a resume full of to-do list applications, because that's not going to be exciting for us as companies. You're going to want to show like some initiative and some ideas that are kind of novel, that are new. It's like, this is a real problem that I have at home. I'm trying to figure out how to automate blah, blah, blah. And so I wrote an application about, how can I do this thing and have it automate and go do all this other stuff. Like for me, one of the next things I want to automate is, like, if you go to the Tech Interview Guide website right now and you go into the streaming panel, I've got to go in and manually build that schedule every time. What I want to be able to do is automate that a little bit, where, I can go put that stuff in a database and say, this day I want to stream, this day I'm not going to stream, or this day I'm going to have a particular guest on the stream. And so that, here's that guest's like LinkedIn and Twitter and whatever, and have something sort of automate, every day, that's going and rebuilding that website and republishing that page. So as soon as something new goes in that database, it's going to start showing up on the website. And then, 2 weeks before, it's going to start tweeting like, hey, Ian's going to have so and so on the stream. Or, hey, just FYI, Ian's not going to be streaming on this date, kind of thing, that it can like send out automatic Twitter messages or LinkedIn messages about who I'm going to have on the stream. So those are the next kinds of automation things that I want to build. Those are the kinds of things that companies are interested in. Like, how do you actually automate those things? Or how do you find like a real world problem and how do you automate that stuff? Like, I could build a completely dynamic application where, every time you load that page, it's going out to a database and it's crunching all that data and then it renders that view. I want something that's a little more like, I like static site generators where I generate that content one time and it just pushes it up, and the HTML is always the same. There's nothing new to dynamically generate every time. I like the idea of static site generators. But for me, there is some aspect of dynamic data that I want to be able to pull in on my website, like my whole financial transparency page. If you do exclamation point money, for example, it'll show you like how I'm raising all this money for this fundraiser at the end of the year, and how I've actually raised that money, how I've made money on subscriptions and bits and cheers and things like that here on Twitch, as well as like the views and things like that. I'm not quite at 1,000 subscribers on YouTube yet, but if you want to follow me on YouTube, I'd appreciate it. If you want to subscribe over there as well, I'm trying to hit 1,000 people, because then I can start monetizing that, and that's all also going to go into this. Like, I don't keep any money that I make as a streamer, but those are things that I want to be able to automate. Is, how can I automate building that financial transparency page where it can go in and scrape all these different data points, build that page, publish that page, where it's not like, if you try and go to that page right now, while you're waiting for it to load, it's going off on all these data sources and trying to scrape all this data and pull it all together. Like, that's time consuming. I want something where it's like, a couple of times a day, it's going out and it's checking my PayPal account, it's checking my Twitch dashboard, and it's checking my YouTube dashboard and whatever. And it's extracting all these bits of data and automatically calculating and compiling that into a single static page and then publishing that static page. That's more what I'm interested in automating. So like find those kinds of projects that are going to be interesting to you, and what is it going to take to go build that? What kinds of skills you're going to need to go learn those things? What kind of APIs you're going to have to call? How are you going to visualize it? How are you going to build a little dashboard for that? How do you know if it's failing? How do you know whether it's working properly or not? Same thing like with my chatbot. I started my stream today without my chatbot running. It's like I should have had something, big flashing on my screen, like the chatbot's not running. Like, don't start streaming because the chatbot's not up. Um, you know, those kinds of things I would like to automate a little bit more. That when I hit a button on my stream deck that says start streaming, that maybe it actually goes in and actually starts the chatbot, or makes sure that the chatbot's actually running. If it's not running, don't continue like launching everything else. You know, come up instead and say like, hey, this thing's not running, so I'm not going to actually start playing the Spotify song, for the intro, because something else isn't running yet. Um, or have a button that actually goes and launches everything on, on my Stream Deck or something, that it goes and runs all that software, to actually run all that stuff. So those are the kinds of things that I want to get into. And it'll be the same kind of thing for what you want to do. Whatever you're interested in application development, you're going to have to figure out, this kind of thing is going to be interesting to me. Do I want to build websites? Do I want to build websites for other people? Do I want to build websites for myself? Do I want to do, this particular kind of application? Do I want to do freelance work? Do I want to change my project frequently? Do I want to work on like one sort of product kind of thing where I get really, really good at that product and I become like an expert in that thing over, years of time? Those are totally okay jobs to have. Some people get bored working on the same thing over and over for a long period of time, but I think you also gain a much deeper appreciation of all the different aspects that go into an application by doing that. Some people, though, thrive on change and they like diving in and doing something new. Um, I know some people that really like starting new projects, but they don't like finishing them. So it's like, okay, well, maybe you're the good person to go in and like plan and get some sort of project initiated and then hand it off to someone else to finish. Maybe you're the finisher. Maybe you like coming in kind of midstream and you want to, watch something finish and deploy and like get out there. Everyone's going to be a little bit different about what their aspirations are. So I think learning that about yourself, learning about what's going to excite you and make you happy about what you want to build. I think that's a big part of what kind of project do I need to go build to find a job doing that thing. But you're gonna have to find that out about yourself. You're gonna have to build lots of different kinds of projects. Not lots, but you're gonna have to build a couple of different kinds of projects to try to figure out like what makes me happy as a developer. What kind of development do I want to do? I've done this aspect, whether it's front end or data science. Like, how do I go learn some other kind of skill? How do I apply that? How do I build a project about that? How do I talk about that transition? How do I talk about why I'm making a change from one to the other thing? Those are all conversations that are going to come up during interviews anyway. And so being able to practice that ahead of time and say, this is why I've transitioned from front end to back end, or this is why I've transitioned from data science into this other thing for these reasons. I wanted to take my career in this other direction, or I wanted to go explore this for a little while to see if I even like doing application development. Turns out I don't. So I went back to data science. Or, now that I took that step, I realized there's this whole other range of where I can take my skill. Those are all possibilities. And so it really comes down to like what's going to make you happy as a dev. How are you going to explore that? How are you going to go learn those things? Um, and then go build some projects. Go build some projects. See whether you actually like it or not. It's going to feel tough to begin with. Um, and some people are going to thrive on the excitement of like, yeah, I get to start something new. Some people are going to be like, oh, this is actually harder than I thought it was going to be. Stick with it. If it's really something that you want to pursue and you really want to try, stick with it for a little while. Like, give yourself a good 3 months, 6 months, go explore that thing. And then once you're at that other, point, then you can kind of look back and have a retrospective for yourself and go, did I actually enjoy that process? Is this something that I want to do? And you can make decisions. You can make better decisions from that new viewpoint than if you stayed where you were dreaming about, like, oh, I wonder what it would be like if I went and did this other thing. If I heard the saying, I like programming more than I like math, what would I think? I would say that that sums up my life. I'm not very good at math. Um, it's not that I don't like math. I really enjoy like finding little math tricks and things like that. Those kinds of things are always really interesting to me. Um, but I'm not particularly suited to math, like the really deep, sort of intricate type of things that you would do with like, data science or machine learning. Like I don't understand any of the math behind that stuff. I looked a little bit into like Bayesian, algorithms and so on, like years and years ago, when it came to like spam detection and learning algorithms and things like that. Because machine learning, like from that aspect, has been around a long, long time. I used to use a tool called Spam Assassin, and I've got some open source stuff that I developed like 20 years ago about Spam Assassin, when I was doing my own web hosting business, where, as in, messages were coming in my inbox, it was scanning them, and then based on machine learning of what I told it was spam or not spam, it would sort of categorize things based on these scores. And so I was looking into like, well, how do those scores actually happen? Like, how does it actually break these things, these messages down into like fragments of words to try to determine like what was going to be spam or not spam? And so I looked a little bit into those algorithms and the math, and I'm like, I don't understand it. So for me as a programmer, like I tend to sort of stay away from applications that are particularly math heavy, because it's not something that I'm particularly good at. Is it something I want to get better at? Not really. I mean, I looked into some data analysis stuff in the past, but even data analysis, you don't have to have a lot of math. You're just interpreting the data that's already there. Like, what is that data telling me as a story? Where the more of the data science and the data processing, you're going to get into more of the math of like, how am I manipulating that data? But even then, the data science can be like, it doesn't have to be super math heavy as well. Again, it depends on the kinds of things you want to get into. If you want to get into like shaders and things like that, where you're getting into like game development, you're going to need a lot more math, because you're going to have to understand how, matrices of, data work, and for coming up with like complex shading and 3D imaging and rendering and positioning and all that kind of stuff. There's going to be a lot more math involved there. So it really depends on a lot again, it depends on what kind of development you want to get into. For me personally, like I really like building APIs. Like I'm really good at building APIs. I'm pretty good at system design. I'm pretty good at the architecture side of things and like planning out systems. Don't really have to have a lot of advanced math for that. Like, yeah, there's going to be some algebra involved with so many systems and, X times two and blah, blah, blah. Like, there's going to be some aspect of that, and having an understanding of like, okay, this data type takes this much memory and this data type takes that much memory, and building an index on those things is going to take so much memory. But again, that's more just simplistic kind of math that isn't like super advanced like trigonometry or anything like that. um so for me, like I don't feel bad about not being good at math. um but if you want to pursue the type of engineering where you're going to need that kind of math, then yeah, you're going to need to be good at it. Fiber Gaming, is good to see you as well. First time chat. Good to have you dropping by. Thanks for dropping by the stream. I'm always curious how first time chatters find the stream. So feel free to drop an intro. Let us know how you came by the channel and so on. Full Stable followed up in chat. Programming is a hard form of math, some say. To some degree, but not necessarily. I mean, the idea of like a math formula is really just an algorithm of like, I need to do this and then I do this and then I do this. It's kind of the order of operations, and algorithms are very structured in a similar way. And I've seen very, very complex math formulas. You see these movies with like these giant, blackboards, full of just formula after formula after formula while you're trying to figure something out. And you make a mistake partway through, and it kind of has this ripple effect, right? Well, our software Algorithms work very much the same way. You do something in the wrong order, or you make a misstep or something in your application, and it has a cascading effect where it's going to like impact how everything else works. And that's just the nature of what we do as developers. Um, so there are similarities to it, but I don't think you need to be particularly good at like engineering level math in order to be a programmer. But I think that there are definitely some similarities in here. Sorry that my camera keeps freezing up. Statistics is a killer. I mean, some aspects of stats are harder than others. I actually enjoyed statistics in college. It was one of my favorite classes. Um, it's interesting to think about like what you're calculating and why. There was a saying that I heard one time about statistics that says stats are like a bathing suit. What they reveal is enticing, but what they cover up is just as important. um, because you can think about like you can use statistics to interpret anything you want, any particular way you want, and understanding like what you're explaining and why has a big impact on what you're sort of analyzing in your data. Just a move. Good to see you in chat as well. Finally received your microcontrollers. You can start your embedded Udemy course. Awesome, sweet. Um, Yeah, so Twisted, I actually saw your comment, and at the very very beginning of the stream, I actually left some extra commentary on the stream about it. Um, so starting with so Twisted was the one in Discord that was asking about like an embedded systems role. Getting the Arduino, definitely want to tinker with that. Build some basic circuitry around like hit a button and watch a light go on. But in order to get like an embedded type of role, they're gonna want to see you do more advanced things than that. So I was saying like maybe take it a step farther, like where you hit a button and it reads a temperature sensor, and then draw out what the temperature is on a 7 segment display. Like they're gonna want to see more algorithmic thinking in what you're doing with the hardware than just I can put these wires together, because that's going to be more on the hardware side of things, where the embedded systems, they're going to want to see like how are you implementing software to interact with the hardware. And so they're going to want to see like some manipulation in there, like go read the temperature, report it in Fahrenheit and Celsius, because there's a bit of math in there, but it's a well-known formula, and it's not hard to implement in code. But they're going to want to see some deeper sort of understanding of poking at the hardware and like reading information from hardware and things like that. Um, Gorenta, thank you for the follow. Not sure how you pronounce your name, so I'll just call you Gorenta for now. Um, but appreciate the follow. Um, yeah, I would say like any sort of work that you can do around like reading sensor data, manipulating sensor data, and doing some like advanced steps of things. Like you'll need to start with, let me go read that temperature sensor, let me go read that humidity sensor, but then like go do something with that. Like is like can you calculate a barometer based on just reading temperature and humidity? Is that even possible? I don't know. But like find ways of reading from the hardware and doing something from a software perspective, because that's really what embedded systems are going to get into from a developer point of view, is how are you using software to interact with the hardware, not just that you can read hardware data or you can write something to a hardware to make LEDs blink, but like doing more automation around some of that, or more advanced um, sort of like software side of things than just reading and writing data. Like read data in and have like a chain of events that happen because of that. Like read in the temperature every few seconds, and then based on that, like light up a number of LEDs, and if the number of LEDs grows to a certain point, like set off a buzzer, or something like that. Like I actually did one with a multicolor LED where when it was reading the temperature, if the temperature was too hot, it turned the LED red, and when it got too cold, it turned the LED blue. And if it was within a nominal range, it kept that LED green. And so then, if you like like blow on the thing and warm it up, you would see the thing start to turn red. And if I like used compressed air or something like that and just like put some compressed air over it to cool it down, you would see the LED gradually turn blue. Like that's getting a little more advanced where you're doing multiple things, where you're reading from lots of different hardware and like interacting with it from that aspect. So any way that you can grow like using that Arduino setup to do more advanced things or more things, the better. Like I made a toothbrush timer for my kids where they hit a button and it would pulse an LED like every couple of seconds. And it basically set off a whole timer of like 60 seconds or 90 seconds or whatever. And as the timer progressed, the LED would flash faster and faster. And when it was the last few seconds, it like flashed like extra fast, so they knew that they were almost done for the time to brush their teeth. Um, but I made like a second stage where the first stage was they were brushing their teeth, and that I could increase the time over time. Like it started at 45 seconds, went to 60 seconds, went to 75, went to a minute and a half. But the second time they hit the button, it was fluoride. So they would do like a fluoride rinse, and that only had to be 60 seconds no matter what. And so I had to have some logic in there of, is this the first time they hit the button or is this the second time they hit the button? Because if it's the second time they hit the button, then I only want that timer to be 60 seconds long. Well, how did I know that it was the second time they hit that button? And a lot of that came down to like just the state manipulation of how long ago did I hit the button the first time? Because what if they were only brushing their teeth and they decide not to do fluoride? Well, the next time they come in and they hit that button, I don't want it to make it 60 seconds where they're only brushing their teeth for 60 seconds. So I had to look back at like how long has it been since they last hit that button, those kinds of things. So understanding those aspects of doing more complicated sort of algorithmic thinking as part of the embedded systems, that's what's going to really stand out for those embedded jobs. I want to make a weather station for my own purpose so I can log into a website, see the data, interpret it, what it means for the weather. Yeah, that's not that difficult to do. Sorry that my camera keeps locking up. I'm having more hardware issues again. Um, from that aspect of just reading weather signals and things like that, you can read those sorts of things and build a dashboard. That's getting more into application development where you're reading data, but how are you going to get that data to a web page? Because an Arduino is not going to be powerful enough to actually run a web server. You would need more of a Raspberry Pi to do that. Raspberry Pi is like a full operating system, and you can actually have hardware and like so you've got a process running that's just reading hardware and writing that into a database, and then on the Raspberry Pi, and then you've got something else reading that database and actually running like a little web server or whatever, where you can actually build out the full stack, kind of thing of like, how do I go read this stuff either from a database or go read it in real time and then draw a dashboard, about that. That's getting into more full stack development, including the hardware aspect of it. But you would need like a Raspberry Pi to do that. Now, if you have just an Arduino running, you can have something else, plug into the Arduino and like read the data off of the Arduino in real time. So there are ways that you can sort of network and make mesh networks out of the hardware, and have it sort of push that data around the system and so on. Lots of different aspects of that. But to get into like building a weather station and so on, there are going to be a lot of those projects out there. If you're not already on a site like Hackster, Hackster.io, I think is the platform. They've got lots of really cool projects on there that you can get in and start looking at like what's possible with these things. Some of them will require Arduino, some of them will require a Raspberry Pi. Um, I would say, what you need is going to depend on, funds available. Like you don't have to go spend like hundreds and hundreds of dollars on sensors and whatever to go tinker with these kinds of projects. But again, if that's what you want to pursue as your career, then that's an investment in your career. But I would say start small, see whether you even enjoy it. And if you enjoy it, then keep pursuing it and gradually add to it, but don't go spend like hundreds of dollars on stuff if you don't even know yet if you're going to enjoy it. Let's see. Viper Gaming's asked a question in chat. I have a question. Is it hard to get a job within the industry while I'm in my second year of university with many different projects I've worked on? So thanks for the question, Viper. Let me unpack this a little bit. So you're in your second year of university. Are you looking for a full-time job or are you looking for an internship? That'll have a little bit of a difference as far as like what kind of role you're looking for and why. If you're looking for a full-time job because you're in university and you're like, I'm tired of school, I just want a job, then that's different. You're looking for a part-time job. Okay, so getting a part-time development job, you probably have an easier time doing freelance development than trying to convince a company like, hey, can I only work like 10, 20 hours a week as a developer? That to them is going to feel more like an internship type of role. Now, the fact that you're in your second year of university, it's going to depend a little bit on what kind of skill you have, what you've been learning, and how you want to apply that, and what kinds of projects are going to be comfortable for you, and what kinds of things you want to be building. That's also going to shape what kind of role is even going to be a possibility for you as far as what kind of applications do you want to be building? Are you into mobile apps? Are you into desktop apps? Are you into like terminal applications? Are you into hardware projects like Twisted Mood? Are you into data science like we answered earlier? It's going to depend a little bit on what you've been learning and where you want to sort of start taking your career. Um, I would say probably starting on a freelance basis, I think would be best. I think it'll give you a good exposure to different kinds of roles and different possibilities of what's out there. That would probably be a good place to start. It is a little hard, though, to start as a brand new freelance developer and convincing people to take a chance on you because there are a lot of other people out there trying to launch freelance businesses and find part time work. But Upwork is a pretty popular platform for entry level devs to get started. But keep in mind, you're going to be competing with a lot of other people. And in some of those platforms like Fiverr and so on, it does feel like what we call a race to the bottom as far as the pricing goes. Because you want to be competitive and you want to stand out. And so that maybe that means lowering your hourly rate, but next thing you know, you're charging like 10 bucks an hour as opposed to 20 or $30 an hour that you could be charging for app development. Again, depending on where your strengths are, if you can demonstrate particular skill in different areas. But the more projects that you can build and sort of build that portfolio, the more you're going to stand out. But if you're looking to work for a particular company on a part-time basis, then that would be something where you want to network with that company, find out what's important to them, find out what kind of projects and ideas and technologies are sort of important to them, and then play on those. Figure out what those projects would be. How do you build those projects? How are you going to stand out? And then how are you going to convince them to interview you? Those are all possibilities, but it is going to take some work on your part to do that research into those companies. Who are those companies? What kinds of roles are you looking for? What kind of development do you want to be doing? Things like that. And it's going to come down to like getting to know a company and finding out they use this particular language. I don't know that language, so if I really want to go work for them, I'm going to have to go learn that language, build a project in that to convince them I can do that job. It's pretty rare that a company is going to hire you without experience in a particular area already in order to go work in that field. For example, if I run a company that does C#.NET development and you've learned Python, you don't know C#, it's going to be pretty hard for you to convince me to hire you as a C# developer when you don't have any of that skill. Again, our whole interview process is very demonstration based, where you have to demonstrate that you have a level of skill in order for me to trust that you can do that job for me to hire you, even on a part-time basis. Now, the fact that you're still a student, it might be easier for you to apply for internship level roles because the company is going to have an expectation over the amount of skill that you have and what you've been learning and the possibility of what you're going to be capable of doing. Where going in as a freelancer, as a freelance developer, they're going to expect that you have some amount of expertise in something. Where if you're still a student and you're still learning these things, you don't necessarily have that level of expertise. When I did this earlier in my career as a freelancer, I would tell people like, hey, I'm still learning this stuff. And so I'm going to like lower my hourly rate because I'm going to be learning some of this stuff while I'm building it for you. And I was just really upfront and honest with companies. And back then it was a little bit easier. There, like I said, there's a lot more competition now. And so it will be a little bit harder to convince companies to do that. But it is possible. I would say the easier possibility there though is looking for an internship level role at a company than to work part-time. But it'll also depend on what your aspirations are. So let me go look at what you followed up in chat. I just finished building a voice assistant with about 17 features that automates tasks, makes folders and files, opens apps. I have a voice recognition system implemented within the program. I've worked on many different projects such as websites. I have some experience, but I haven't gotten anything yet. Okay, cool. So you've done some really cool projects. Um, you would want to reach out to companies that do those kinds of things. Are there businesses out there that do voice assistant or voice assisted types of things? For example, I know Amazon just laid off a whole bunch of people doing Alexa, and so that's probably not going to be a good place to go apply for a job. But one place that may be underserved, go look at medical assistant software platforms, especially for people who are, have vision problems. They need voice assistance, or other people who are maybe in a wheelchair and they can't move around, or maybe they don't have the use of their arms or something like that, and they need voice assistant to do certain tasks. That might be a possibility. Go look at medical companies that are doing those kinds of things and say, hey, I've built this kind of thing. I'd like a part-time job, or do you have an internship thing available? The fact that you're still a student is honestly going to be a bit of a turnoff for companies who want to hire you part-time. And I can speak from experience on this. I worked at a company where I hired an intern, brilliant intern. Still stay in touch with the person to this day. This was over a decade ago. I hired them as an intern, and they were absolutely brilliant. When they went back to school, they're like, "I want to keep working part time," and I'm like, "Let's see what we can do because you're an amazing person on the team, and we want to keep you on the team." And within like a week, they're like, I can't keep up on my studies and work, any reasonable amount of hours. Like they wanted to be working 10 to 20 hours a week. And I'm like, we're getting like maybe 3 or 4 hours of actual productive use out of you. So it's not going to be a good split of your time. And so I actually encouraged them like, hey, like it would be best if you didn't work part time and you just focus on your studies. They focused on their studies. They went and they launched a company that got bought, so it was a better move for them to do that. Um, so I'm not trying to project that onto you, but it will be hard to convince a company that, hey, I'm still a student, I'm still like going to school, I'm still learning these things, and I also want to work part time. That's actually going to be really hard to convince a company that you can juggle all of that and that you can actually work a certain number of hours per week and keep your studies. Um, I think a lot of companies are going to want you to do the responsible thing and say like, you know what, you need to focus on your studies. I think they would be more willing to hire you as an intern than to hire you as a part-time person. Um, but that would be one thing to take a look at, is see if you can find companies who are doing voice assistant type of things, or voice assisted types of things, to kind of cater on the project that you've already built. That would be a fantastic project to pitch to like a medical group. Go look at people that build automated systems for people in wheelchairs, that need those kinds of things to automate things around the house. Go see what would be involved in that. It's probably a lesser thought of kind of industry. Everyone's going to want to do like the Google or the Alexa or whatever. um, they're going to want to go work in those really prestigious kinds of avenues, but then you're competing for very high stakes jobs at very high stakes high tech companies, where other companies also need that kind of level of skill, um, and level of expertise. So if you've already been building projects like that and that's something that you enjoy doing, there are going to be a lot of other companies out there that are doing similar things who are going to be competing with Alexa and Google and so on. But maybe you can help sort of shape that industry a little bit more if you've got an interest in doing that. Yeah, follow up on chat here a little bit. Might feel like a good idea at the start of the semester, but then school and life happens. Yeah, the worst outcome is when a smart student we want to hire feels bad about not putting enough time. Yep. So a lot of similar things. Fool Snable is sharing based on my own experience as well. Hey Zenbender, good to see you in chat as well. They video record you and your answers. They transcribe them and score them and pass them on to the company. First line of weeding out people. Yep. Do you talk to a computer voice or do you just talk out to the void from a scripted question? Being recorded without interacting feels awkward. Yeah. Yeah, video recorded, quizzes and things like that on interviews always feel really awkward. Um, I haven't done too many of those myself, but it does feel very pre-canned. Like, here's a question, you have 90 seconds to answer. Click a button and start recording your answer. You do sometimes have a little bit of time to prep and you know try to think about how you want to answer that question. But in a real interview, it's going to be very similar. They're just trying to automate as much of that process as possible to where a human being doesn't have to be the one sitting there doing it. It was horrible for me. I don't like being in front of a camera. And it wasn't a recorded video of a person asking just the audio. Yeah, that would definitely be awkward. Sorry, Zenbender, I actually missed your initial chat that you had to do the automated review. It was difficult to get comfortable. What's my advice? The advice is you're gonna have to become comfortable because there are companies out there that want to automate that kind of thing. I would say if the company is big enough to automate that kind of thing, you gotta wonder like they're kind of losing that personal touch on there. From a screening point of view, I get it. It does automate things, it does free up their time as human beings, but it does make things very impersonal from that perspective. And so I think it gives you a bit of a signal into what's important to that company. They're looking at efficiencies over the human interaction of like how we want to treat our candidates. So for me, that would be a bit of a flag. Not a huge like giant red flag where I wouldn't want to like work at that company, but I think it would be annoying for me. It wouldn't be a process I would enjoy either, to be honest. Um, I don't, like I said, I don't think I've done that kind of interview myself, but I wouldn't be excited about that kind of interview process. But there are going to be companies out there that do that sort of thing again from an efficiency point of view. And I think understanding a little bit about why they automate that, I think would be helpful. Um, to really have an understanding of like what's important to them and why um, from that perspective. But every company is going to be a little bit different over their expectations and um, why they're automating certain aspects. But I would worry that they're losing some of the personal touch because like you and Fool were both saying in chat, like they're really coming down to how do I interpret the words you're saying and assign that some kind of score. If they still need a human being to go back and listen to your answer to really accurately say like, yeah, that was actually a good answer or not, what would the difference be of actually having a human being talk to you and say like, let me score that in real time, where it can be more of that conversation as opposed to just the one-sided interrogation. That doesn't feel like a fun interview process for me. It was so impersonal. What kind of company treats their employees like that? Yeah, I couldn't get over it. I closed the web recording tab during the second question. Yeah, I would say, if I mean, you can. So this goes back to something that I've talked about a long time ago. Is you can ask interviewers or you can ask recruiters ahead of time, like, hey, what's the process going to be like here? What's like, how many steps are there in the interview? Can you tell me who I'm going to be interviewing you or interviewing with? How many stages is it? How long does it take to get through, the entire process? These are questions that I try to ask the recruiter on the very first phone call along with, hey, what are you offering for the job as far as salary? Just so we're on the same page, and we're not setting each other up on a missed expectation. The very first phone call I have with a company is, what's your salary, and then what's the interview process going to be like? And you can start to drill in on those kinds of things. Like, is this going to be like an automated recording thing? Is it going to be like, is it all human interactive? Are there automated steps like that? Like, you can ask those kinds of questions. If they say, yeah, we have this automated quiz that we want you to do, you can be like, meh, is there any way that a human could do that? Because I'm actually not comfortable doing a camera recording like that. Like, I would much prefer like an actual human interactive phone call. Is that a possibility? You can ask for certain amounts of accommodation during interviews. Um, if that's really what they want to do, though, and they're like, no, we really don't do that, we want to keep it fair to everybody, then you can opt out and say, okay, I'm not going to apply at that job. But if it's a company that you really want to work at, you're going to have to jump through their hoops. And that's the unfortunate aspect, is if you really want to work at a company and they know that you're really passionate about working at their company, you're going to have to do what they want you to do to get that job. Are you going to have to work extra hours? Or are you going to have to, work for a boss that you're not going to like? Is it, are you working for customers that you're not going to enjoy working for? These are all things that you're going to have to consider when it comes to applying for that job. And these are all things that you're going to learn as you're sort of going through and learning about the company and sort of researching the companies and so on. Looking for a job at my age, I wish I'd gone the software route in life. Major employer has tons of openings for devs and sysadmin types. I don't see a single listing for manufacturing of their products. I mean, it's not too late to get into software development, but there is going to be ageism for sure. And that's something that you're going to deal with no matter what aspect of the tech industry you're in. Viper Gaming follow-up. So the voice system I built, I called it Jarvis. I made it so that it listens to the microphone, executes the feature if it's within the program. The reason I built the program is because there's a student who can't see, and I know someone who couldn't type because of an injury. That's why I decided to build the software. So what type of industry should I be trying to apply? So again, Viper, going back to what I was saying, like, you're building those things specifically for like assistive features, not just assistant features of like, oh, I want to tell Google to turn on all the lights in my room because I'm about to live stream. You're literally doing it for medical purposes. And so I would be looking for like medical systems. I don't know manufacturer names off the top of my head, but there are going to be medical groups out there who are building these types of technologies, and those are exactly the kinds of companies that you're going to want to reach out to and say, hey, I wrote this on purpose. I wrote this specifically for a student who had vision problems, another student who had physical limitations. I specifically wrote these applications with them in mind. It shows a really deep user empathy. It really shows a maturity on your level, that you saw a real problem in the world, and you found a way to solve it for another human being, to make their life better. So yeah, I would start researching like medical groups that do voice assistant technologies for just automating tasks and so on, and then applying to those jobs, and highlighting that project and say, this is something that I've been working on. Again, I think you're going to have an easier time looking for an internship as opposed to them hiring you part time. But if they have an internship available, you're going to really stand out as a candidate because you've built that kind of stuff already. Hey, RC, good to see you. Feeling okay. Energy level's starting to drop a little bit. I've been going for about 2 hours now. My voice is still holding up though, which is good. I haven't coughed too much in the microphone, which is great. I see Black Deep says, I interviewed a guy once who used to do electronics repair. He said, I saw these things coming out that couldn't be repaired and saw the writing on the wall, so I got into software. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, they're gonna be a lot of changes in the industry where I think software is still gonna be a big thing. Um, and yeah, RC, some things don't change at all. Like my hardware still crashing. I rebooted. Now my camera's locking up all the time. That'll teach me to reboot ever. I think I just need to reboot about 5 more times to settle this thing down, and it'll be good for another month until Microsoft comes out with another patch or something, and I'll have to do this all over again. Yeah, good times. Um, But yeah, Viper, I think you're onto something. Like you've got a good project that you've built, and it's it's a valuable thing that companies are going to want to look at. But you're going to have to research who those companies are. Got GBAV in the house. What's up, GBAV? Um, People like military type action games, getting into like Fortnite and Overwatch and stuff like that. Go give GBAV a follow. Um, Two of the major companies in my hometown, Collins Radio, now Raytheon, used to do avionics for aircraft and BAE Systems. Bought out Collins GPS. Hey, Roboso, good to see you as well. Feeling better. Still feeling really congested and still coughing a little bit. So I'm drinking lots of coffee and tea and things like that just to stay hydrated. I've gone through so much water. I got like an order of hint water and it's almost all gone. Like within 2 weeks, I'm just like chugging water and I still feel dehydrated. Shout out and props to anybody that's had to go through COVID. This is nonsense. I hate it. Um, let's see. I think I'm gonna start to wind down a little bit. I can down a water pitcher pretty quickly. Yeah, for sure. Um, but yeah, Viper. I would say like look into those. Hey, Darth Colin, good to see you as well. I would say look into those medical groups. But again, I think you're gonna have an easier time with an internship than convincing them to hire you part time. I think they would bring you on for like a 3 month or 6 month internship, and that's also going to look really good on a resume that you've had professional experience working in that. That's going to be huge for you. There's also Google. Yeah, I mean Google's going to have a pretty tough interview process, and there are rumors flying around that Google's going to start laying off their underperformers. Although the joke in the industry is like even an underperformer at Google is probably better than some other developers, but not necessarily. It just means that they got through the interview process a little bit, at Google. So they might just be better at interviewing. Google isn't really hiring. It depends. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm gonna start to wind out a little bit because I do have a bunch of other things I need to get done today. So yeah, let's go find somebody we can raid into. Let's see who's online. We got some advent of code going on. Got some AI stuff going on. AI stuff is always fun. Some info stuff going on. Hey Viper, thanks for the follow as well. Normally I'd have these lights blinking in the background when people follow, but my light panels are all broken and my bot's broken, like all kinds of stuff going a little wonky on me. So, let's see, MLH is online. I don't know any of the MLH people though, so we'll right into them. Let's see. We got some infosec. We got some AI. We got some advent of code. Anybody has any preferences? Let me know in chat. Viper says, even though I don't have vision or typing issues, I'm still using this thing on a day-to-day basis. I wanted to make other people's lives easier. That's that's exactly the pitch that you want to sell people with this project. Like you want to talk about like I built this for other people, but I found it so intuitive and so fun to use. I'm actually doing it myself. How's the family doing, Robo? So my oldest is still coughing a lot. The youngest seems immune to all of this. Hasn't been affected at all. And wife is feeling a little bit better, but yeah, it's miserable to go through. Not having fun at all. Um, all right, we're gonna go right into advent of code. I think I haven't done a raid into this person in a while. Raid over there. Let me go set up a chat for that. Amish Ace in the house. What's up, Amish? Haven't had Amish come by the stream in a while. Dark Saber looking sleek, yeah. So Amish and I was telling Amish on his stream last night about like getting some LEDs or something like that. So I want to get the light kit for the BD1, and I want to get the light kit for the trench run, which I haven't even assembled yet. But the trench run is sitting right here. I still have to assemble it, but I want to get the light kits for these. They're actually on my Christmas wish list for the family to get me. But I want to hook these up to like a Raspberry Pi that if people can buy the chat, they can turn the lights on or off or make BD1's eyes blink or something like that. It's not gonna be that hard to do. It's just controlling the the signals and whatever when something comes in. Did I make the Superman? I did make the Superman. So this is all 3D printed and it's enormous. This came out of the stand. Yeah, this is the latest build, and his head is like proportionally small compared to his body, but that's all 3D printed. A little bit of paint on the uniform, mostly paint on the cape because I had to assemble the cape in multiple pieces. But it's actually taller than the Spider Gwen. I thought Spider Gwen was the tallest thing I'd built, which is almost 2 feet tall. This thing's over 2 feet tall. And this is actually a gift for a friend of mine that's a Superman fan. So I'm going to be taking it to the show that the kids are doing this weekend at their school, just to show people like this is possible with 3D printing. And then this one's going to be given away to my friend as a gift. He doesn't know it yet, but he's going to get it. So, RC or not RC, Amish. Be right back. Amish. I thought you'd get a kick out of these. Oh, perfect time for my camera to freeze up, of course. There we go. 3D printed lightsabers in multiple colors, but they're also the collapsible blades. So the blades will actually like come out of the thing themselves. And so this one's a like an Obi-Wan, and then this one was Rey's lightsaber. But I did this one in a burnt titanium and a silver with the yellow blade. The only thing is the little triangles didn't stay on here very well. I'm also going to try printing this in a resin, but it'll come out as a single color. So I may do it as a resin print and then paint it afterwards. And then that one came out pretty nice as well. And then on both of them, they like the cap will actually come off so that you can change out the blade. So I printed the blades in different colors, so you can swap this out and put in like a red blade or a green blade or something like that. And then this is just its own 3D printable piece as well. So Amish, I thought you'd get a kick out of that. I honestly started looking for Ahsoka's lightsabers that would actually be collapsible. Because I was asking you on your streams, like, what color of lightsaber blade would you want? And you mentioned like the white with the blue. I actually found a white glow in the dark blue filament, so it prints kind of a clear white color, but it glows blue in the dark. Um, and so if I can find a good collapsible hilt for that Amish, I'll do one in a multicolor, and I'll send it your way. I've got the blue filament coming in; should be in today actually, but I need to find a good hilt with a collapsible blade that'll come out. Um, Unfortunately, they're not very kid friendly. I'd love to send you like some of these for your kids, but they wouldn't be very friendly. They'd like hit them once and the blade would shatter, and that wouldn't be good. But the hilts are pretty hefty. Probably weighs a good quarter pound to a pound. For the hilt with the blade in there. But we're going to be taking these to the 3D print show this weekend. Well, it's a winter festival that we take 3D printable stuff to. But this one came out pretty good. It's a little bit jagged and it's still got some of the support material stuck in here, but I'm hoping I can like sell these at least. I need to find out whether I can actually sell those printed models or not, or get permission from the modelers to let us sell them. But But yeah, the titanium color is amazing. Yeah, someone on the channel, it might have been RC Maniac, actually mentioned the burnt titanium. So I picked up a couple of spools of it, and it actually prints really neat. Like from a saber color, it actually came out really nice. If I were to redo this, I'd probably do the middle part here in like a brown or something, make it look like the leather or something like that, or do this in a couple of colors of like a leather brown or something like that. But the rest of it actually came out like really nice detail. I mean, it's a little jagged from a 3D print point of view, because it's a combination of like quality and speed. It's like the better you want it, the slower it's going to be, and I didn't want it to be like a 10-day print. But yeah, I've been having a lot of fun with printing those. So Amish, I'll see if I can find an Ahsoka hilt that has a collapsible blade, and I'll send that off your way. It'll probably be in the new year sometime. And yeah, there's no paint on that. It's all 3D printed color. So this is all 3D printed with different colors of filament, on the bamboo printer. So this one's kind of a sparkly black and just a silver, and then you got the red and the bright silver chrome color in there. But yeah, a lot of fun printing those. What else did I miss? Oh, which maker did I source the hilts from? Good question. I honestly don't remember. I would have to go back and look at my browser history. Um, I want to say the Obi-Wan and the Rey saber were actually the same maker. They also made a Sith hilt as well that I did just in black, and then I like painted the actual lights and stuff on there. That came out pretty good. I mean, the nice thing about 3D prints, like it takes acrylic paint really well. Obviously, Superman and Spider Gwen, those got paint. Um, and I'd use just acrylic craft paint to paint them. Um, but I'd have to go back and look at the man at who it was. I don't have it off the top of my head. My chair is making me nervous. Please move Superman farther away. Yeah, I've bonked him a couple of times. But thank you for the reminder. I haven't actually knocked him down yet. Anyway, yeah, we're gonna raid out. I think we're gonna raid over to Shale Codes, and they're doing some. Make sure they're actually still online. Oh, they just went offline. Okay, so we won't raid over to them. Let's see who else is online. Who can we raid into? Anybody have Sumanex says Black Friday I purchased a ton of furniture, turning half my office into a workshop. Awesome. Love it. Thanks, Robo. So I appreciate that. Somebody coding Tetris. That sounds fun. We haven't raided over to Claire in a little while, so we'll go raid over to Claire. All right, we'll see everybody over on Mine Wolf's channel in a few seconds. Feel free to say hello over there. Be friendly and be supportive. Good person doing some 100 devs work. And yeah, I'll be back online on Thursday for sure. I will be streaming this Thursday, not the following Thursday, because I'm actually going to be speaking at a local event. So I won't be streaming on the 15th, but the stream schedule is all up to date on the website. You can go check that out. Oh, my camera's so broken it's not even turning back on now. So perfect time to raid out. So yeah, we'll catch everybody over on Mine's channel, and see everybody over there. Cheers.